In part one of this series, we talked about using the tools of separation, meditation, and recreation in a new spiritual discipline to practice the habit of hope. In part two of this series, I want to explore what to hope for. What should we hope for? Revelation 21 portrays everything we could ever hope for. A new heaven, a new earth, recreated. No more tears or dying or pain or crying. Let's explore three things to hope for: revelation, salvation, and resurrection. Revelation. Life today doesn't resemble the recreation of Revelation 21. We see a world bitter, divided, without answers, and we grieve. We don't understand what God is doing about it. We get frustrated by the troubles and failures because we can't fix them. But God doesn't typically tell us why. Like a parent giving age-appropriate answers to a child, God only reveals what we are ready to accept. I think I understand what God is doing until God reveals how misguided and incomplete my understanding is. I'm learning to hope for God's revelation. As I recently listened to lessons from Bema Discipleship, the Bible Project, N.T. Wright, and Doug Jacoby, I've come to rethink just about every biblical doctrine that I thought I understood. I'm learning to approach the scriptures, assuming there's a lot I don't know. I'm no longer afraid to ask hard questions because I hope and trust that God will reveal to me a more complete picture of who He is and who we are created to be. This hope for revelation produces a renewed humility and a sense of discovery. Salvation. God's plan of salvation began in the garden, where God designed humans as partners to represent Him, to rule over the earth and reproduce offspring in His image. Humans rebelled. God plotted to rescue us. In the New Testament, Jesus fulfilled this plan, bringing the kingdom of God back to earth. It helps to think of the kingdom as a verb, not a noun. Jesus reestablished the reign of God over the earth, not an institution. Salvation is God's invitation to join Jesus' campaign to restore the kingdom or reign of God on earth as it is in heaven, starting with us. This is the salvation we hope for. Resurrection. Picture a beautiful sunrise. The sun saturates the earth inch by inch, bringing light into darkness, life into death, hope into despair. Darkness resurrects into light. Or imagine the blooming of springtime, trees and flowers that appeared to be dead brought to life in the beauty of a million colors and fragrances. Life springs forth out of death. Now picture Jesus, crucified and buried in the grave. Hope was crucified until Jesus resurrected. Jesus' resurrection is a taste of what is to come. As Paul explains in 1 Corinthians 15, just as the planted seed blooms into a glorious tree, our mortal bodies will be transformed into immortal, imperishable, resurrected bodies with power and splendor. God has big plans for His children, a new heaven and a new earth, bringing His entire plan to fruition as we finally live out the Genesis 1 calling to be God's partners over His renewed creation. What do we hope for? God's revelation and the humility and sense of discovery we experience as God reveals more of His truth to us. God's salvation reinstates our partnership with God to restore His reign, His kingdom to earth. The resurrection that will one day transform and recreate heaven and earth. That's what we hope for.